Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to the show. Today on Elevate Your AIQ, I'm joined by someone I've known and admired for the last several years. Adam Gordon is the co-founder and CEO of Poetry, and a familiar voice to many through his co-hosting duties on the weekly Recruiting Brain Food live show with Hong Lee. Since selling his last company, Candidate.ID, Adam has been laser focused on what he now calls hiring enablement, rethinking how recruiters and hiring managers can be empowered through smarter workflows, AI agents, and a unified workspace. In our conversation, we dive into the origins and evolution of poetry, the burnout challenge in TA, responsible AI, and the urgent need to rebuild trust in organizations. I think you'll come away with new perspectives on AI's role in hiring and what it means to truly elevate the talent acquisition function. Thanks for listening. Let's go talk to Adam. Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. Today I have the pleasure to speak to Mr. Adam Gordon. How you doing today, Adam?
Hi, Bob. Thanks so much for having me today. It's great to talk to you about talent acquisition and AI and stuff like that. And how am I doing today? I feel like the marathon runner who's not trained sufficiently for that marathon. I might come in last, but I'm determined I'm going to finish as we approach the end of 2025.
That's all that matters. Yeah. So Adam, just tell me, or tell my listeners who may not be familiar with some of your work, just a little bit about your background, your entrepreneurial, journey, and what's going on at Poetry.
Yeah, sure. So from Scotland, I actually grew up in England. I spent a lot of my time growing up in the south of England, just outside London, and I went to boarding school for 5 years in Edinburgh. That didn't really suit me. I think I've probably got PTSD. I've certainly got some sort of impact of having gone to boarding school, which has shaped my way of living as an adult. And I started my career in recruiting in 1999. I moved into recruitment marketing. I moved into consulting in the HR services practice at PwC. And I wasn't a great employee, to be honest. I wasn't terrible, but I was not that motivated. And I was probably just above middle of the road performer. But when I started my own business in 2009, that's when I became super motivated because I had a big mortgage to pay and needed to make sure that, there was food on the table and the bills were getting paid. And I was much more motivated when all the sort of necessities were no longer covered and a hungry wolf hunts better. So I started a company called Social Media Search in 2009. That was a talent sourcing business. And we sold our time for money, surfing the internet, finding people that our clients wanted to hire. We had some big clients, Thermo Fisher Scientific, Mondelez, IQVIA, and they paid us a monthly retainer just to do sourcing for them, really. And then I sold that business to an executive search firm called Norman Broadbent, a London stock market listed business in 2012. And then spent 4 years there on the operating board. I loved my time there, really posh part of West London with some very, very smart people I was working with. It was a great experience. And then in 2016, end of 2015, I left to start my first technology business. That was Candidate.ID. Candidate.ID I started with Scott McRae, who's an expert in marketing automation technology. Scott's sadly no longer with us, but he was the technology brains and I was the recruiting brains. And between the two of us, we took a product into the market that talent acquisition teams really needed, but they weren't aware that the technology existed. So we had to sell the concept before we sold our own brand and then our own technology. And it was, when you're doing all of these things and you're not just taking something and as a copycat into the market, you've got a lot of work to do. So it was 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And then at the end of year 5, we started selling a lot. We brought in a lot of new customers. And then at the year 6 point, we were acquired by iCIMS, became part of that business in March 2022. I spent 10 months there doing the handover. Really loved my time in iCIMS, learned a heck of a lot about, so this is what a real technology company actually looks like.
Yeah.
Because I'd never worked in one before. And again, met some really smart people, learned a lot of great ways of doing things and processes. And I left there in January, at the end of January 2023. to spend 6 months on garden leave, but I spent that 6 months really just learning about how do recruiters get enabled with technology and processes in the same way that sales teams get enabled with products like HighSpot and Seismic and Confluence, and in the legal world, things like Harvey. And I got the sense that they didn't really. We give our recruiters an ATS, we give them an Indeed account, maybe a LinkedIn recruiter, and then we tell them to go and be entrepreneurial. And what that means is they're all doing things in completely different ways. So I think I learned sufficiently enough validation that the world needed a hiring enablement technology. And on the 1st of August 2023, I started a business called Poetry with a good friend of mine, my chief technology officer from Candidate.ID, a guy called Mike Hughes. And we've been building that since.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember I think I saw a very early demo when you were at the tail end of your research phase for Poetry. And I loved the concept. I loved the way, I mean, I think it's evolved quite a bit since we had that conversation, but even just from a visual standpoint, just a way you sort of categorizing, some of the resources that recruiters might need into categories based on, either phase or activity or whatever it is. It just, even that was sort of a leap forward from my understanding of how, recruiters were actually, scrounging for the right resources to, whether they were sourcing or whatever activity they were doing. It just, I love the concept. And then since then, I mean, you've obviously leaned into, AI and AI agents and some of the ways in which a recruiter can sort of personalize, the activities that they're doing, based on the role and based on candidate. Maybe you could just unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the like you alluded to, the product design and a number of really important concepts that I've learned over the years is recruiters want to use as limited number of technologies as possible to complete their tasks. So from day one, we wanted to ensure that Poetry was not another technology for doing interview questions or for doing research or for doing job adverts or doing one unique, task in the course of like 50 different things that a recruiter needs to do to work on their rec. We wanted to solve many different problems and provide many different solutions within the one workspace. So that was one of the key principles from day one. Another one of the key principles for day one was simple and elegant design, so that there's not a huge amount on the screen when you're on there. It's not like, being on Amazon or being on LinkedIn where you're bombarded with competing messages, like hurting your brain. Not quite as simple as this, but like blue turns left, red turns right, that type of thing. Really, really simple design, and therefore extremely easy to use. You don't need to look up the instruction manual. You don't need to click the help wizard. You don't need to phone up customer success, because it's very, very obvious what you do next. And we've changed. I mean, there's certain buttons on Poetry that we've changed, and solutions that we've changed the name of, 3 times, because we've recognized that something else is an easier to understand way of explaining what something does. And then, as you said, like categorizing the different solutions into the sort of stages of what a recruiter might use it for. So we categorize it in 4: marketing, operations, learning, and tools, or MOLT, we use as the acronym. So marketing covers all of the talent sourcing and recruitment marketing things that a recruiter needs, from Boolean strings to outreach messaging to social media posts and job adverts, for example. There's 12 different solutions within that solutions group. Operations is things like the assets and content that you need to work through a recruitment process. So it's things like job descriptions, interview guides, those kinds of things. Yep. Learning incorporates research. So we've got a lot of different research solutions in there: competitor research around the demographics and the for the geography of where you're hiring, and what the job discovery, for example. Also within learning is like team learning. So a lot of that is for a brand new recruiter. How do we use the ATS? How do we do job boards? How do we do raise a rec? All that sort of things. And then T's for tools, and tools is things like business case builder, Boolean builder, and sort of other things that don't neatly fall into the marketing operations and learning. So we have worked very, very hard at product design and, as I say, making it really easy for a recruiter to know how to use, because recruiters are really burned out with the number of point solutions they need to use beyond their ATS in order to get all their tasks completed. We took inspiration from BT, British Telecommunications, who told us, they showed us their recruiting workflow for a typical rec, and there was 72 different processes in that. And around a half of them were covered by the standard technologies, mainly the applicant tracking system. And around a half of them, they either weren't covered, not in BT specifically, but in TA teams. There was either no technology solution enabling recruiters, or it was covered by individual point solutions, and didn't make sense to me that we would have 30 different things, that recruiters need to log into to get their tasks completed.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And you've seen, double-digit improvement, right, in terms of their, I forget if that was related to their overall productivity or just taking, giving time back, right? Wasn't it like 25%?
I mean, that's right. If you take an individual rec, for example, so the workflow, if our client has integrated with their applicant tracking system into Poetry, we've got integrations with Smart Recruiters and Greenhouse and Lever and Pinpoint and others. And the workflow is really simple. They log the rec within the ATS as standard. That sends a signal into Poetry. Poetry then makes a decision around, is this blue collar, white collar, exec? Is the talent in scarce demand, like scarce, or is it abundant? Is the talent in demand, or is it like quite freely available? And then determines, okay, is this a sourcing exercise? Is it a marketing exercise? Is it a just go to the database exercise? And then it decides what is the pack of assets that I need to create for the recruiter to work on that, based on, determining which activities they're most likely to want to do. So it builds all this pack of assets and then sends it into the recruiter's inbox on email within 2 minutes of them logging the rec on the ATS. So if the recruiter is using Poetry, our research is telling us that they're saving 25% of their time every day.
That's a lot.
I mean, it really is a lot. And recruitment teams are being asked to work out ways of automating as many different processes as possible in order to take on more recs, in order to provide more valuable internal consultancy, for example.
Yeah.
So we're really creating a huge impact on a recruitment team's ability to be able to do more great work.
I think the doing more great, like higher value work is awesome. I do get concerned if the organization says, oh, that's great, here's 25% more recs, right? It gets into the larger conversation around what Alan Walker and I were talking on LinkedIn about, what I called the reinvestment dilemma. Like who gets the benefit of that? How much goes to your employees? How much gets reinvested in new technology? How much is just banked, by the COO who says, let's take that. I'll take that win. But it's, it's concerning. I mean, if you're alleviating some of the pressure on recruiters, but then, because they quickly feel a little bit of relief, and then somebody just puts more on top of the pile.
I completely understand that as an issue. And I recently read John Vlastelica's blog about how to become a talent advisor and what the talent advisor 2.0 looks like and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
And, instinctively, recruiters are going to be doing less traditional talent sourcing and less interviewing than they were before. They're going to spend less time creating the assets that they had to create before because of tools like Poetry. But you're right. The chief operating officer may well look at this and go, yeah, I want that efficiency back. I don't want to put it into this team spending more time providing advisory guidance to hiring managers and influencing the best way for the business to operate when it comes to things like, a candidate experience and employer branding and how to shape the role and, how to think creatively about where to source and, those types of things. I do worry that I've described it as an age of employment brutality, because I don't think right now there is one CEO of a major company who wants more people on payroll.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and studying tech venture capital, and tech venture the kind of premier tech venture capital firms are clamoring to invest in companies that have got like hundreds of millions of revenue with like 6 people in the company.
Right.
And
right.
This is gonna phase into every industry as we work out ways to shortcut lots of different white collar processes.
Yeah.
So I'm also concerned about what it means for our recruitment teams, and if they're asked to take on 25% more recs, what it means if they're continuously, and I know Toby Culshaw has been talking about this and others have been talking about it, if they're taking on 25% more recs and the work that they're doing is at 100 miles an hour because it needs to use their brain at full capacity all day, every day, what chance have they got when it comes to burnout? It's going to be hard.
Yeah, that came up, Toby, and Toby was part of that Alan Walker post recently, and so we had that conversation as well. And it is definitely a concern. You can't just be, redlining your engine all day. That's not fair. But just getting back to some of the specifics around your MOLT, sort of framework, the piece where you're getting, I guess it's a learning piece, where you're getting some of that like sort of talent intelligence kind of data. Is that through any kind of like partnership, or you've just built an agent that specifically does that kind of like recon to pull in that data in real time, or how does that piece work? I was curious.
Yeah. We use a variety of different sources to develop the intelligence we develop. And I have to say, we've done it quite differently to your typical talent intelligence providers in that they provide extremely deep dive research reports around where to put your new manufacturing site and for what reasons and like all of that type of stuff. What a white collar kind of recruiter or an experienced hire recruiter typically needs is bite-sized, digestible information, because they're handling 5 new recs every day and they need to get, quickly sheep dipped into the nuances of that particular role.
Hi, we're Meg and Amy from The Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
We can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to The Meg and Amy Show.
So we use a number of different large language models. Specifically, we use OpenAI and Perplexity. We are continuously evaluating what we can provide with those versus what we can provide with others. If our clients have got their own existing data and information, they can upload that into Poetry, and Poetry reviews all of that in accordance with what the research ask is. We do have a number of third-party plugins for People Data Labs and others that help to enrich some of the information we get. And we've done thousands of hours of research around the system prompting and where we're pointing for information so that the information coming back is completely verified, is up to date, is consistent. Some of our favorite sources include things like Indeed reviews, Glassdoor, PayScale, for example. Mm-hmm. And we've really eliminated you could go onto a ChatGPT and you could say, give me pay data for software developers in Hyderabad. And then it gives you the information. And then you can ask the same question again in the same thread and it'll give you different information.
Yeah.
And so we've really eliminated the sort of inconsistencies that you get from using just a standard chatbot, large language model chatbot.
Yeah, no, I know you've blogged about this before, which I think is a really important point. I've seen people, quote unquote, instructors showing people, oh, you just take this job description, take this information, just throw it into ChatGPT, and there's your answer. It's like, this is I don't know who deputized you, but this is scary that you're teaching other people, the wrong way to approach this. So I like that you've sort of embedded that in there to just say, look, this is not, the inconsistency will basically feed into bad practices, first of all, and then probably get you into trouble where the AI governance, police come knocking and say, show me how you've consistently sort of vetted, the results and how this is affecting your decision making. Right. So I think it's a really important point.
I mean, I think, Bob, you and I are both experienced users of large language model chatbots, and pretty certain that we can both get a ChatGPT or a Gemini or something to give us really great information that's going to help us to do our jobs. But if you and I are sitting in the same team and we've got exactly the same task, we are going to go about it in a different way if we are free text typing what we're looking for, because we use different language, because we've got different brains.
Yeah.
Now, when you're looking for something really nuanced, that's absolutely fine. But when you're looking for something that's completely repeatable, is an everyday thing that many people in the team are going to be looking for pretty regularly, such as, I need a job advert, I need outreach messaging, I need a social media post, I need interview questions. We have very deliberately removed the ability for users to go and free text type what they're looking for. It is, which team are you hiring for? Which job within that team and which location are you hiring for? And then behind the scenes, what Poetry's doing is it's bringing together, well, we know for the structure of this asset, we always use this intro, we always use this outro, we always use this hashtag, we always use this equal opportunity statement, we always use this tone of voice. It's always done in bullet points with an opening paragraph and, finishing off with a specific whatever it might be, call to action. We've done a huge amount of work around, if the job is in Germany, it's always got these characteristics. If the job is in the USA, it's always got these characteristics. If it's in California, it's got these. If it's in Texas, it's got these.
Yeah.
So we've given our clients the ability to really add in a lot of configuration options according to the characteristics of the job itself. But then for the recruiter, it's press 3 buttons and they've got what they need. I really believe that the concept of free text prompting is full of peril in talent acquisition.
Yeah.
For many worse reasons than the ones that we're answering, which are, we don't want the employer brand to be inconsistent. We don't want the candidate experience to be inconsistent. There's, of course, much bigger dangers in talent acquisition than that. But that's what we're solving for, is consistent candidate experiences and consistent employer brand. But yeah, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really nice approach. I mean, you could potentially have a bunch of junior folks, but even if they're senior, like that might be worse, right? Because they're stuck in their ways and they want to approach it in a certain way. But this way, you've got guardrails that say, let's stay within these parameters, and as part of your sort of risk mitigation strategy, within sort of in the moment and context, but in the larger space, if you were to come in and get independently audited, which I recommend everybody do in talent acquisition, then you just know you're on better footing as well.
Well, I mean, I think the alternative, if a company wants an alternative to what we're providing in creating all the guardianship around the quality of the output, the only other real way they can do it is by putting together a library of prompts and insisting that every recruiter uses that same library, but it would need to be prompts plus templates plus documents that your Copilot is pointing to. And I just don't know anybody that's done that like successfully.
Yeah.
It's a big undertaking. And that's why we've just baked it all into the background. It's vastly more complex than I had imagined it was going to be.
Right. Yeah. And it's evolving all the time, right? So you always got to make sure that you're listening to what the market's looking for, continue listening to your prospects and clients. And it just seems like there's a lot that people need to constantly keep up with. So maybe this alleviates, some of that, because you've got at least a little bit of a controlled environment to a degree.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, the concept of like AI hallucinates. I mean, it does. It doesn't in poetry. There's no chance for it to hallucinate because we've put such strong guardrails in place that it's not a thing.
Yeah,
and we've absolutely squeezed that out. But at the same time, we have therefore made the options a lot more limited for people to be able to freestyle. And so, if somebody wants to give their team, I don't know, recruitment marketing training and then allow them to go and embed their own personality into their, content or whatever, we're not offering that. But when you do that, the chances are you're using something which will hallucinate and will add things in which you just don't want in your, talent attraction communications.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was reading something this weekend that basically ran some tests. I don't know if it was part of like full-blown like red teaming kind of exercise, but it was basically showing that how, people always talk about like, well, some people are nice to their AI assistants. Some people are more sort of, demanding or, borderline rude to their AI assistants, and how that can change results. I saw something this weekend that basically said, even like whether you like capitalize letters and your grammar or whatever, like all these little tiny things that you wouldn't think matter. Well, I'm basically asking the same question. Like you're not. So I was just fascinated by the fact that you can capitalize certain, like you're literally using the same words, but you're capitalizing, certain letters, and it somehow gives you a different result. I mean, I guess it just, compounds the point that you were making. Like you're leaving too much to chance, and you're actually unintentionally injecting variability in the responses when you would think of something completely benign, and yet here we are.
Yeah, I mean, Copilot, Gemini, they're all highly trained to spot sentiment in the way that you are talking, and so little changes can come across as you're in a hurry, or you're irritated, or, you're actually things like if your spelling's bad, your grammar's bad, or whatever it might be, actually it's going to talk back to you in a way that's a little bit more simplistic than if you're using like, highly intelligent language or whatever it might be. So it's a fascinating and evolving subject.
Yeah, it's crazy. Adam, I noticed you've started using the phrase hiring enablement. Is that an evolution of recruiter enablement? Maybe you could just talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it very much is. And so when I started learning about this subject after I left iCIMS, it was all about the recruiter that I wanted to learn about. How do we as talent acquisition teams equip our recruiters to be more productive and successful with the right technologies and processes, etc. But recruiting is a team sport. And I am aware that every company has got the recruiter doing a job which is shallower or deeper into the recruiting process. In some companies, the recruiter is involved in the hiring decision. And in fact, in I think one or two companies, the recruiter makes the hiring decision. But then right through to others where the recruiter is really just doing the sourcing, stage, handing over the candidates. And then it's the hiring manager's job to do the interviews, the assessments, the offer stage, etc. And so we did recognize that there are talent acquisition teams or hiring hiring teams where hiring managers want access to a lot of the things that we're providing. There's more in some companies, the move towards hiring manager self-serve for finance, for mainstream HR, for things like procurement, and now occasionally for more in the way of talent acquisition, is a trend. Is it right for every organization? No, it's not. But for some businesses, we didn't want to position Poetry as, well, it's only for recruiters. Your hiring managers can't be using this, because we've got lots of hiring managers who are, using this. And I think that trend is likely to continue as recruiters do less traditional sourcing and interviewing work. I think that their job is that team's job is more so about the operations, the employer brand, and the enablement of the hiring process. So that was a conscious move that we made earlier this year, probably about the beginning of this year, from recruiter enablement technology to a hiring enablement workspace.
Got it. And even beyond the hiring manager, I was just thinking about some of the things. I think it came up on Brain Food last week, actually. We were talking about like employer branding, talent attraction, things like that. I mean, technically, you've got information and resources that could feed into, whether it's the copy or specific messages, obviously beyond a particular role or particular candidate. But do you see the folks on the front end doing like talent attraction and employer branding, like are there resources within Poetry for them as well?
I would say the guardians of your company's workspace are the people who are responsible for talent attraction, employer branding, recruitment operations. They're the people who set the rules around what types of, what's our tone of voice when we're approaching engineers? What's our tone of voice when we're approaching salespeople? What's our style of advert when we are trying to attract salespeople or engineers or scientists or whatever it might be?
Yep.
What's our style? What message do we want to portray and experience do we want to deliver in Germany versus in Canada? And what are the things we need to assess for in the interview questions we need to give to early careers professionals versus experienced hire professionals, for example? So they're the people who kind of manage the workspace, set the rules, set up the templates, determine exactly what the recruiters are going to get. And so it's really it's like their environment. They own the environment. It's their bar. They decide what the tapas are going to be and what the beer selection is going to be. And then the recruiters come into the bar and go, I want to have one of those, and they get what they need.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, absolutely is the answer.
Yeah, because it just seems like, specifically, like you said, with the tone of voice and some elements of culture or whatever, I mean, it seems like for consistency's sake, so you've got those broader messages, and now you're in the weeds, you're working a role, a rec, and talking to candidates.
Well, I talked to a kind of regional head of talent acquisition in a major company last week, who told me that she'd been sent a whole bunch of like advert templates and brand guidelines templates and things like that. And they were all up to date. And this was what had to be used. And she was to cascade that to the 5 managers in her team, who were then to cascade that to the 5 recruiters each in their team, right? And she said, I'm going to do the cascade. By the time it gets to recruiters, it's been through 4 email, steps in the email chain. Yeah. I don't think they're going to take any notice of the guidelines and the templates. And that just really exemplifies why we want them baked in, so that there's a change to the employer value proposition. You change it once within the guardrails in Poetry, and everything that gets produced from there is immediately updated. You change it once, all the assets are immediately updated with this new thing. So that's something that's been an important aspect of what we've been trying to solve for. And it eliminates the problem or the feeling that recruiters have when they go onto a SharePoint to try and look up where's the templates and go, this says 2023. I don't know if this is just the latest one or if it's the first one I've found.
Yeah.
And that was something we really wanted to get rid of.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you're cutting out a lot of the playing telephone. I don't know if you have that analogy in Scotland, but
yes, we do.
Yeah, I don't miss, I got to tell you, working at big companies, I don't miss that nonsense where it's just like cascading communications. It's like, I wonder what it looks like when it went from the SVP to the VP, and then it gets down to the frontline employees, but a completely different message.
I don't miss working in big companies either, not at all. But I do love working with big companies and aiming to solve their problems with a solution. They're complex, and they're complex, and there's so many different things that come at me every week that I'm like, there's another way that we need to, make this more sophisticated in order to solve for that, issue, whether it's around, I don't know, a diversity, equity, and inclusion thing, or it's a localization thing, or it's this word doesn't mean the same thing in South Africa as it does in the USA, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I do, when I talk to executives at big companies, they don't even have to be executives, just anyone who's working for a big company. I have empathy for the average person at a big company, and I also recognize some of the challenges that they experience, and I do want to help solve them. I don't want necessarily people to go through the same nonsense that I experienced. The other thing is just being, my last role at NBC, I was a director, but I was a director by title, but I was really an individual contributor. I didn't have a team. But because I was working in like office of the CIO, chief of staff kind of responsibilities, I was literally witnessing them like sugarcoat things and sort of twist things as it went down the chain, like thinking about like employee surveys and like stuff like that, right? Well, how can we communicate this in such a way that it's like, no wonder people don't trust senior leadership, because they see right through some of this stuff and they don't change their behavior. So, I mean, trust is really at a premium, perhaps more than ever. And if we don't get that right, and everything you're communicating around AI and AI adoption and AI strategy, all this stuff is going to just fall on deaf ears if you can't be transparent, you can't be trustworthy.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Words really matter. You can say the same thing in two different sentences, and it lands in a completely different way according to how you've structured the. In fact, you could say with the same words, you can use exactly the same words in two sentences, but according to the way you've, ordered those words, they land in a completely different way. Yeah. And you talk about trust, and I agree. And Edelman's 2025 Trust Barometer shows that trust for between people and organizations of all types is at an all-time low, including there's been a sharp drop of the trust between employees and for their employers. In the last year, it's dropped 3%, and that's a huge drop. And so, how do we get the trust back? And do we want to get the trust back? Do the CEOs want to get the trust back in this new era of employment brutality that I talked about earlier? I don't know if they care. I just don't know if they care. And unfortunately, what that means is there are so many vital concepts of talent acquisition, such as, inclusive language and anti-bias and great candidate experience and employer branding and things like that. I mean, I've never seen as many talented and impactful employer brand people on the market looking for a job and not entirely knowing what they're going to be doing next. A lot of these things have been massively deprioritized. We know from the number of DEI jobs which do not exist anymore. I mean, there's still some, but there's a lot less than there was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And trust is a vital concept for sure.
Yeah, my contention, which
What if I told you that your boss skydives, Tim in marketing is a magician, and Sam in accounting does sums in his head while standing on his hands? Seeing sides of the people you work with but never see, sides that inform and inspire their work and that can inspire yours, is what The Talent Show is all about. Email me, Tom Alexander, host of The Talent Show, at talentshow@backboneinc.com and show us what you got. I look forward to seeing you on The Talent Show.
as I think about it, is probably slightly biased because I've been spending a lot of time in, the responsible AI space and human centricity and things like that. I had hoped that any sort of divestment in, DEI types of resources would fall under that sort of responsible AI umbrella in terms of like fairness and governance and things like that. I don't know if that is going to pan out, but I still contend that we're all in trouble if we can't trust each other and we can't trust leadership and we can't trust the AI solutions. Where does that leave us, right? I mean, the trust thing within an organization, I mean, unless you've got very aggressive ambitions to, just get to as few people, human beings as possible within an organization, I just don't understand how you're going to have any longevity. I mean, without trust, the engagement drops precipitously. And so then you don't have people who are engaged and loyal and, doing their best work. I mean, that doesn't leave you in a good position.
No, and I think you've just said it, though. I think it ties in closely with the concept that companies want as little full-time permanent employees as they can have. And, if that is a goal, then why do they need to put in, any extra effort? They're going to have to put in extra effort with the superhumans who can operate on the red line all day, every day. But beyond those, and they will roll out the red carpet for those people, and they'll probably just pay them a lot of money rather than like create a pleasant environment, I would expect. As companies like famously Goldman Sachs have operated like that, for all time, and so have McKinsey and some of the others. But is every company going to have to raise their expectations on humans like that? Maybe.
It's interesting to think about what we were talking about before, where like a recruiter would get 25% more recs since you saved them 25% of their time. Well, maybe that won't be necessary because you're not doing that much hiring anymore. You're not hiring the humans. So who are you recruiting?
Yeah, I do think that, and Jonathan Kestenbaum talked about this recently from Alexander Mann's AMS. He said, yeah, there may be less roles getting hired for in an organization over the course of a year, but there's also going to be more turnover. So the amount of recruitment you need to do is not likely to drop, because like length of stay in a role is clearly dropping, and therefore even if you just stand still without growing headcount, you're going to be doing more hiring.
Yeah, I'd like to see a whole dashboard of how these levers are, moving each other, because I can appreciate that perspective from Jonathan. And I think one of the things I think about is, again, going back to this decreased trust leads to decreased engagement and all this. It's like, where did we go wrong? Like, why we should be trying to increase tenures at companies, and yet it seems like nobody's doing that. That tenures continue to shrink. So spending an awful lot of money recruiting people and talent attraction and all this stuff for people to stay like less than 2 years. Like, what is the point?
Yeah, I mean, it fits in with the rise of fractional working. It fits in with the rise of people doing, gig jobs and doing multiple jobs. And, the number of, I saw statistics recently that showed the number of Americans doing more than one job's at an all-time high. And the employment contract, the emotional contract between somebody and their employer has really dropped off. And I wrote recently that, my dad, worked for 2 organizations during his career. And today that's like not happening, but it's more likely somebody works for 2 organizations at the same time.
Right.
So, we've gone a completely different direction. And I can't see that changing. I do wonder if it ties in with the political environment, which is, a little bit hostile. I'm not particularly left-wing or right-wing. I'm somewhere in the middle, I think. I don't identify with any specific political party, but I do feel like we have entered a more hostile global environment than I can remember I was born in 77, and I think the 80s were a little bit, they weren't that pleasant. But since there was a lot of disasters in the 80s. But I mean, since then, and a lot of union work, industrial action, and stuff like that. But there wasn't the whole sort of ethnic tensions and religious tensions and tribal problems I don't think that there are today. It's really been magnified a lot.
Yeah, these are definitely challenging times. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but I wasn't, paying much attention to politics when I was younger. But yeah, it's kind of a disaster, and I don't know. I'm concerned with some of the things going on here in the States for sure, and I understand why people want to sort of control their own destiny and work for themselves. And AI, I think, enables a lot of people to do that if you do it right. I mean, the problem is a lot of people aren't doing it right because they're just not being responsible by design. It's another money grab, like it was at the beginning of the internet and social media and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot for us to overcome, but I think that's also why I lean into this concept of being responsible by design and trust, because we're all, especially in talent acquisition, it's like it's a pretty big ecosystem, right? And so for a time, those who are being responsible by design should have a competitive advantage if we actually use that as one of our sort of grading criteria of who to do business with, right?
I mean, I would certainly hope so, but the organize a lot of it, it might come back, but I think a lot of the whole concept of OpenAI in the first place was that it was open source, it was available to everybody, and that it was going to do good for billions of people around the world. And of course, they subsequently have abandoned that in the pursuit of being a corporate entity, a corporate profit-making entity. So they're not for profit. Like, top code doesn't exist anymore in the same way that it did.
Yeah.
And I as you were talking there, what came into my mind was the availability of AI is plentiful for you and for me. We're educated professionals with a lot of experience, and I'm nervous that AI is going to separate the cognizant from the incognizant a lot more, and there's going to be further social immobility.
Yeah, there are definitely societal, moving away from the technology itself. There are definitely societal, social, concerns. And I think about that from experienced folks like us in the current workforce, and it concerns me from a future workforce perspective as well. I mean, my daughter, you have kids?
Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they're both very fluent with using ChatGPT and other technologies to help with their homework and to do things like that.
Yeah.
They go to a private school, and I'm certain that 8 and 11 years old kids in more impoverished parts of my city have never heard of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And their parents haven't either. So that's what I mean. I just wonder if the people who are already using technologies like this, they've got an immediate and very, very long head start.
No, I think there's a lot of opportunity to create some mentorship, programs and things like that. Because I just joined my school district's AI task force, and we've had a Ask Us Anything session recently. And, there's a broad range of concerns, because this is a K through 12, community. And I don't know. I mean, my daughter's already applying to college, and so she's kind of, that's a whole nother issue of which college she winds up at and how quickly they're adopting AI. But I also have a lot of friends with younger kids, your kids' age, and it's definitely a concern. So how do we level the playing field, within the classroom, but also make sure the parents are paying attention and they get the support that they need, and they're using and installing, if they do have devices, are they installing the right tools, and do you have visibility to what they're chatting about, right? So so much to worry about these days.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my kids aren't on social media or anything like that yet, and I we're resisting that for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Although on that, I also learned recently from JT O'Donnell that there's been studies to show that those people who were disallowed from using social media until they went to college, they've then become much more addicted than the people who, were exposed to it in a way where it was semi-controlled, but they appreciated how to use it. And yeah, there's more snakes than ladders in all this.
Yeah, that's interesting. So basically they had all this pent up, need, like it was being withheld from them, and then they got in it, and now they're just addicted.
More addicted, spending more time on it because they weren't gradually introduced to it in their sort of teenage years.
Yeah, no, that's pretty scary. So what, aside from ChatGPT, anything you play with when you're not working at Poetry? I mean, anything else you use creatively, or just anything that scares you any more than the stuff we just talked about?
I've done a lot of experimentation with image building AI, with video building AI, with music producing AI, and the enhancements in all of them over the last, 12 months have been remarkable. You'll remember, anybody listening to this will remember the days when, you asked for an image of a person and that person had like 7 fingers in one hand and 3 fingers in the other hand, and like arms facing different directions, or, that doesn't happen anymore. It is unbelievable how quickly, technology is taking over a lot of things that we didn't think were going to be taken over. And I am very nervous for all creative industries. I'm nervous for certain types of professions. In particular, I've got a lot of friends that are lawyers, and I just don't really know what an entry-level lawyer is going to be doing in 3 years' time.
Yep.
That job is getting completely subsumed by artificial intelligence. Marketing, there's a lot of jobs in marketing that, and even data analysis. And as we know, it's so much easier to develop code. And I am mega impressed with products like Replit and, Windsurf and Lovable and things like that.
Yeah.
Their ability to, even 6 months ago, their ability to create, to create products which were usable for a tiny group of like you and a small team. I mean, that was not a problem, but their ability to create products that could be used right across your company, that wasn't quite. They didn't have, a lot of things around security and scalability and whatever. Today they do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never. But I do want to say to that though, it's never been easier to create technology. But that doesn't. Creating technology and creating a technology company are very, very different things. And there's a lot of people right now who are on LinkedIn saying, hey, I've produced this thing. It can do this, this, and this. And, come and try it, test it out. And I know they don't know anything about ISO 27001 and SOC 2, and they don't know anything about where to host it. And they don't know anything about, data backups and all of the other sorts of things that you need to know about. And they don't know anything about brand and positioning and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I would caution people, just because you can build something, it doesn't mean it's easy to build a technology company.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important to think about, because it is easy to just get something that looks on the surface like, oh, so many people could use this. Oh, this solves this problem, whatever. It's like, okay, well, you haven't really done anything yet. It's right now, it's just sitting on your little site, and it looks good, but you haven't, to your point, you haven't tested it with users. You haven't tested it for all these technical, elements that are necessary to scale it, and you haven't done the work. I mean, it's good that it's an experiment, but let's pause before we just throw it out into the masses, like LinkedIn, where people just, grab it, and, it's a very sort of unstructured and then kind of haphazard way to do it. So build something that people really want, but then build it such that it can scale and people will be confident in how to use it.
Yeah, certainly. There were years of learning that I did around how do you build a technology business before I got involved. Like for 4 years, I watched anybody that because it's easier to build technology than ever, I would recommend if you want to sheep dip yourself into how to build a technology business, go on to Techstars YouTube channel and just go and watch it from the very beginning. There's let's call it a movie. It's a documentary really, and it's called startup.com, and it's like 25 years old, and the full thing is out there on YouTube. Go and watch that. That's how Techstars, startup.com. Go and watch these things, and you'll learn in that how to go about building technology companies.
Excellent. Well, Adam, I want to let you go. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me. Anything coming up for Poetry in 2026 you wanted to share?
Yeah, I've not said this publicly, but I'm going to say it here publicly. We've had a lot of interest this year from staffing companies, and we've let them test Poetry, tell us what it needs to do for them, for their use case. Poetry up until today has been for in-house talent acquisition and RPO teams. We will be, by the 1st of April, launching an environment which is a parallel environment, which is for staffing companies. There's been a lot of interest in that. It's not quite right at this point. A lot of the buttons are not quite right. The field labels are not right. But actually, it's not a huge, lift for us to create this parallel environment. And that's going to be one of the big things that we're doing from the 1st of January until the 1st of April. So we're looking forward to that.
All right. Awesome. Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be probably mid-January. So you'll be in the thick of it, and people look forward to that for 2Q. So yeah. Sounds great. Well, thank you again, Adam. It's always great to talk to you, and appreciate your time. So thank you.
Bob, it's been a real privilege. Thank you very much for having me today. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. We've covered a lot of interesting topics.
Likewise. Thanks again, Adam. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.